Back in about 1982, I became resident manager of an old rooming house in Placerville, California, better known as Hangtown. Placerville is just a few miles from Coloma, where the gold rush took place at Sutter's Fort on the American River. The rooming house, during the gold rush era, was the only hospital in the area. It consisted of 42 rentable rooms and several miscellaneous rooms that were used by residents for laundry, storage, vending machines, a TV room, community kitchen, dining room, and my office. I'd been manager for about 6 months before the chaos started. I've always been a sensitive, having had several experiences all through childhood and adulthood. One cold winter night, a bad storm had moved in, and the main highway to South Lake Tahoe had to close, trapping several skiers and gamblers halfway up the hills. It didn't take long before the motels and hotels filled up. I got a call from the police department asking me if I could accommodate the stranded travelers. I let them know that I had about 10 or 12 vacancies, but to let them know that our power had failed due to the storm. All streetlights were out, and there was total blackness everywhere. There were several steps leading up to the entry door, and I was afraid that in the darkness, someone might get hurt. All of the tenants helped out. We gathered up the candles and put them out on the steps. We dug up some old coffee percolators and made the coffee the old way and set out to greet our guests. They didn't come in one at a time. They came in at about 10 at a time. I paid some volunteer residents to get rooms ready while I checked the people in. There was a group of the younger residents there at the stairs with flashlights ready to take the new guests up to the long flight of stairs to the upper rooms. As the guests would arrive, these men would chant, "Welcome to the Hotel California. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave." All went well, and the next morning, everyone thanked and said they had a wonderful stay and really enjoyed the off-the-wall hospitality. Shortly thereafter, we had a tenants meeting. During the meeting, these men were chanting the words to the song Hotel California and called my attention to several verses. During the storm, I had lit the candles to show the guests the way. At one time, the community kitchen had been the manager's resident kitchen. In the day of the hospital, it had been emergency room. In the master's chambers, they gathered for the feast. Other verses fit also. Every time the song would come on a radio anywhere in the rooming house, the volume would be cranked. Then one night, as I sat up figuring the next day's bank deposit, I heard screaming. It was the young girl down the hall on the first floor who was living there with her small son. She told me that there was a face of a man on her wall. My husband went and checked it out, and yes, it was there. Later that night, about 2 a.m., she came to my office again and said that she kept hearing a whistle, like a bamboo whistle, and her child's voice calling mommy outside her room. I went down there and heard the same thing. One of the young men who was still up watching TV went outside to check it out. He said the sound was coming from every direction he walked. He would hear it from the south, north, east, and west as he walked. By now, the commotion had woke up just about everyone in the rooming house. The TV room filled up with people telling me of the experience that they had been having, but were too afraid to talk about it until this night. About 4 a.m., everyone went back to bed. I stayed up, along with 2 of the younger, more brave men. As we sat in the TV room talking, we heard loud stomping coming from somewhere in the back part of the lower story. At the end of the main entry hall, there was a swinging door that led to the laundry area. Beyond that, the garbage room. Beyond the garbage room, there were other empty rooms that I was told later was the hospital morgue. As we passed the community kitchen and started to approach the swinging door, the footsteps got louder. We all looked through the window at the top of the swinging door and saw no one. Just then, the door swung open and stayed open as though someone were holding it. Needless to say, me and these brave men backed up quickly. No one was standing there at the door, but it remained open for several seconds and then swung shut. It was a quiet, still night, so the theory of a breeze or wind is out. In a few minutes, the footsteps started again, just as loud as the first time. We looked down the hall, and the swinging door was opening and shutting continuously and with a lot of force. We were all speechless. All this time this was happening, we were still hearing the whistle and the child's voice calling Mommy. In the nights to follow, there were several incidents, and some residents that have been there for years moved out. Within a matter of a few months, I was gone. I've never gone back there, but I wonder to this day if there are still occurrences at that place. Every time I hear that song, it brings that place to mind, and when it does, I get a cold chill, and every detail is just as visible in my mind as it was that very night. My best friend Kay just moved out of a house that is most definitely haunted. The house is in Dayton, Idaho, a small town of about 200 people, about 10 miles north of the Utah-Idaho border. It sits on Dayton's main street across from the city park. It's a large old house that has been divided into a two-family dwelling. My friend lived in the front part of the house, while another family lived in the back. Kay told me that she and her 3 kids never liked the house from the beginning, but she had taken a new job in Preston and needed to find a house to live in. After spending days looking for a place to live, she was told about this house and went out to look at it. She said when she saw the house, it looked dark, even though the sun was shining. When she went inside, she said the house was even darker inside, and there was a heavy feeling in the house she just couldn't shake. She really didn't like the house, but it was all that she could find, so she took it. From the beginning, she and the kids disliked living there. Her 14-year-old daughter hated staying by herself in the house and would do anything to avoid being alone. She said that she always felt like someone was watching her. One afternoon, when she was alone, she saw the dark figure of a man looking through the hall window at her. This really scared her. The hall window was high enough off the ground, and you would need a ladder to see in the window. When you pass the hall window, the hall turns and goes past the stairs and ends in the master bedroom. This part of the hall at the house of the stairs is always frigid. My friend had found a new home to rent and was eager to get out of the house. I was helping her pack, and I had mentioned to her how cold that hallway was by the stairs. It was like walking into a freezer. She said that it was always like that. Even in the summer, when it was 90 degrees outside, she said that the hall was freezing cold. I thought at first it was cold because the storm windows had been left open, so I closed them. Then it dawned on me that it wasn't that cold outside because we've been having such a mild winter. It also felt like a cold wind was blowing across the hall, even though there was no drafts anywhere. The cold spot never moved. As soon as you went into the bedroom, or upstairs into the bathroom or kitchen, it was warm. But as soon as you stepped into the hall, you froze. Her 8-year-old twin boys would never go to bed alone. Kay told me that they were scared to sleep without each other being there. Mac told me that he and his brother Jared never went to bed alone, that it was too scary to be up there. Until they moved into this house, they had never been afraid to sleep alone. Kay and her kids finally moved into their new house. The other family that lived in the back moved out 2 days before Kay did. Renters never stay long in that house. Their new house is bright and cheerful, a stark contrast to the old house. I've experienced a lot of these kind of things all my life, but this was the first time I had never experienced psychic cold or cold spots. I get cold just thinking about it. I read your personal story. It was spooky, but I enjoyed it. Thanks for having the courage to share it. I've also had some paranormal experiences, but considerably mild in comparison to yours. Please allow me to share them with you. The first possible experience occurred when I was very young. Under the age of 8 years old, I had an imaginary playmate, but my mother thought I was in touch with the entity. The playmate was adult, male, and went by the name Shadow. I don't remember Shadow, but I do remember the last time I talked about Shadow, because my mom asked me why I didn't mention Shadow anymore. Apparently I would talk about him at great length. I said that Shadow had gone away. My mom asked me when he would come back, but I said I didn't know. When my mom asked where Shadow had gone, again, I said I didn't know. My mom told me she used to hear me talking to Shadow, and that it sounded one half of a telephone conversation. It wasn't like I was making up the other half of the conversation, but merely responding to something that was being said to me. Perhaps I was in contact with the entity. However, Shadow never frightened me. He was a comforting presence. Perhaps it was an entity, although I've wondered if I was in contact with my guardian angel. Then again, I've always had a strong imagination. Perhaps it was just an imaginary playmate. The next paranormal experience happened in my brother's home in Moss Beach, California, approximately 1/4 of a mile from the Moss Beach Distillery, a restaurant that has a reputation for being haunted. When this experience happened, I did not know about the hauntings of the restaurant or of the history of the area. My brother's house has a downstairs bedroom that has long been considered my bedroom because I always slept there and always with the door locked since everyone else slept upstairs. One night, I was awakened out of deep sleep by a man's voice, a voice much deeper than that of my brother's. The voice sounded angry, full of accusation, and said, "You don't belong here." I had a brief glimpse of a man in my room. His back was to the window, so he was in silhouette, but very solid looking. What I could see was a very craggy and rough-hewn looking face, and he was wearing a heavy canvas jacket, like the type firemen or fishermen wear. He was pointing down at me in the bed. However, it was just that brief glimpse, and then it was gone. I've wondered if I dreamt it, because I was able to go right back to sleep. However, I doubt I would have dreamt that I didn't belong there, because I had spent so much time in my brother's house that I felt I had as much right to be there as my own brother did. When I told my brother of the incident, he said he had something spooky happen also. One night, about 2 a.m., he was still up reading when he heard someone coming up the stairs. My brother built his house from scratch and was very familiar with the entire house. It wasn't one creak that he heard. He heard every stair being trod upon. Thinking he had a prowler, he got out a gun and went to find out who was in his house. He found nothing, and all the windows and doors were locked tight. He said it was very eerie. Later we found out that Moss Beach coastline, not too far from Half Moon Bay, was the site of a lot of illegal bootlegging activity during Prohibition. There were accidents, gunfights, and other tragedies that follow illegal activity. Since finding out about the history of the area, we have since wondered what it was that my brother and I encountered. The last paranormal experience that happened occurred within a 3-month period after my mother's death. Perhaps I should say experiences, because on 3 separate occasions, I heard knocking. I was living with my maternal grandmother in the house my mother grew up. Each time I heard the knocking, it was just 3 evenly spaced knocks, but they were loud. Third time it happened, I went to answer the front door, convinced that someone was there. My bedroom was in the back of the house, which was some distance from the front door, so the knocks had to be loud for me to have heard them. I'm not positive, but I think it was Mom coming back to say hi. There's another possible experience. Both my husband and I felt something pressing down on the bed while we slept. The first time it happened to me, it woke me up. I thought the cat had just jumped on the bed near my feet. When I realized the cat was next to my pillow, it got my attention, but again, I was not afraid. The cat often moves his head and eyes like he is watching something I can't see, and only in the bedroom. And when I'm in the apartment alone, taking a shower, I hear a man's footsteps coming into the bathroom. They always sound the same, and I'm guessing they are a man's footsteps because the stride is wider than a woman's and heavier. Like I said, my experiences are very mild in comparison to what you have experienced. I've never felt fear during the experiences, but later, contemplating the possibilities, I tended to spook myself. Pretty tame stuff, but every now and then, it grabs my attention. I haven't tried to talk to any entity, if indeed there is an entity, because I would rather the experiences remain merely an amusing conversation piece, and not the source of a major investigation. Thanks for letting me share my story. You have a terrific site. I hope to visit again. Hi. I just wanted to submit my story of some experiences we had in the house my daughter and I lived in from August 2001 to February of 2002. This house is located in Pendleton, Oregon. In July 2001, we lived in a small duplex that burned down, so my daughter and I lived in it for a short while. Then the hospital I worked for had a house that no one was living in, so we were able to rent it. This house had a complete upstairs, then another apartment downstairs. When we first moved in, we didn't notice anything at all. Then my dad moved in with us and lived in the downstairs apartment. First thing that happened was in the very early AM, like 4 a.m. We could hear a baby crying from somewhere in the house, but the exact location could never be found. Then my dad, who was a true skeptic of the supernatural, actually admitted they had seen a young woman in a large brimmed red hat in the downstairs area. Both my daughter and I could hear people walking up and down the concrete steps that led to the downstairs apartment. Shortly before Christmas that year, I was laying in bed, mostly asleep, but aware of the house, and I heard very distinct footsteps coming up the back steps, walk through the kitchen, dining room, living room, and into my bedroom. I even heard the bags rustle at the end of my bed as they walked by. I stand straight up, thinking it was my dad coming upstairs to tell me something, and when I looked, there was no one there. I laid back down and heard the footsteps walk back out of my room, through the other two rooms, and back down the stairs. One of the most interesting things that happened was that my daughter loved to sing, and she was recording herself sing on a very simple old-fashioned tape recorder. She sang 3 songs. On the first one, everything was fine. Then on the second one, it started out in her voice. Then all of a sudden, it was a man's voice singing the song. Then that song got over. Then it went back into her voice. This was so scary, we couldn't believe it. Then right after the New Year, my dad became very ill and was admitted to the hospital for over a month. While he was gone, the haunting became even more noticeable. We would hear very loud noises coming from downstairs, and the TV would turn on and just blare. So, I completely locked up the downstairs so no one could come or go from any of the entrances. One night my daughter and I were watching TV, and all of a sudden, the TV downstairs came on so loud, it was shaking the upstairs. You could hear people walking around in circles in the kitchen, and you could hear voices of 2 men arguing and talking, coming from the downstairs. We ended up having to move, so I don't know if any haunting continues there or not. The house has since been sold, and new people live there now, and I've always wanted to ask them. Hello, my name is Laura. I've had a lot of experiences in my life. A lot of people say ghosts follow me, and especially my sister-in-law, who has been around me when things seem to happen. I would like to share 2 incidents in particular that scared my family and also myself. The first story starts when we moved into my grandmother's house. Everybody in my family said it was haunted, but I did not believe it. I visited there and spent the night there a lot, and nothing too strange has happened that could not be explained. It was the second night in the house, and I was giving my daughter a bath. She was taking her bath, and I was sitting on the sink, plucking my eyebrows, when all of a sudden, she turned to me and said, "Mommy, there are red eyes in here." I said, "What? Where, honey? She turned to show me, and look on her face was that of shared terror. I would never forget the fear in her face. She let out a piercing scream, and I was afraid. She was acting like someone was coming after her. I ran, grabbed her out of the tub. We slipped to the door, and I dove out of the room. My husband was dead asleep on the couch, but he flew up and went into the bathroom, swinging his arms. He thought someone had broken in or something. She was really freaking out. We were in the living room trying to calm her down. She was hysterical. All she kept saying was, "He's gonna get me. Don't let him get me." And we said, "Who?" And she said, "The man with the eyes." We let her know she was okay, and nobody was coming for her. We almost calmed her down, and as soon as we said we wouldn't let anyone get her, and that she was safe, the garbage flung across the room, and it was loud. That was the last incident that night. My cousin was sleeping over one night. She went home crying because I told her about the incident that happened, and she got a little vocal to the ghost, and a screwdriver flew off the fridge and hit her in the stomach. There were happenings like doors opening, water turning off, scratching at the doors, and on, and toys going off by themselves. Second story. We recently moved from Fort Lauderdale to St. Augustine. We actually moved to Lake Butler. We lived out in the middle of nowhere. One day, I was up watching TV. I had nothing to drink, and I do not do anything else. Anyway, I was watching TV and got distracted by something out the window. It looked like a green glowing circle. It was about the size of a golf ball, and the light was gleaming off of this thing. I was wondering to myself what in the world. All of a sudden, came another one, and then another. In like 2 seconds, there seemed to be at least 10, and it looked like they were trying to come through the window. I got scared and turned my head, thinking it would go away. As I turned my head, I looked at the door window, and a flash of heat lightning or some kind of flash lit up the window, and it looked like a man, almost transparent, but not quite. He seemed dark. I don't know. Anyway, it is hard to explain, but it got me so bad, my body hurts. I ran to the window, closed the blinds, and ran to bed, and forced myself to sleep. Things still happen a lot. My family and I just choose to ignore it. I hope you all don't think I'm crazy. Thank you for listening. Hey everybody, it's phantomfdarkness here, and I just wanted to say thank you for being so patient while I got this video out to you guys today. I knew there was a video that was going to be coming out today, and obviously here it is, so hope you enjoyed it. Here's a virtual hug, a virtual hug, and the virtual of most virtual hugs. A virtual hug. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, guys, as usual. Anyway, hope you enjoyed these batch of stories. Go ahead and comment, like, share, and subscribe. The best way you can get these videos out to the masses is just share it like it's pizza. And if you don't like sharing your pizza, well, you're going to have to do it anyway. Because in this family of phantoms, we all deserve the we all deserve the piece of the pie. I'm not even going to leave out that edit. Wait, no, I am. Wait, what am I talking about again? Anyway, guys, let's just skip to the end really quick and say good night, good morning. I'll see you in the next video. Be sure to let me know how you feel about life, and I guess that's the way it works. Okay, I'm trying too hard right now at this point. Guys, I'm just gonna go. Bye-bye. Good night. Love you.